of WEBtips. So this is Lance Yoder again. It's that time of the month again for learning about Transaction, Central, and Query, and some of the tips and tricks that we have in store for you this month. So just a reminder that every other month that we focus on the desktop tools, and alternating those months we focus on forms and workflow. And we try to squeeze in some tips and tricks that combine the two, since you can use transaction scripts and forms. But today we're going to be looking at a few items. I think one query, a couple items on Central, and then some things in Transaction. So just for those of you that are watching these recording for the first time or joining us for the first time, just an overview of WEBtips. It's intended to be a quick, short duration session about just some of the things that we're doing within CPS using the Winshuttle tools, the query, transaction, form, and workflow tools, to give you just some inside tips on how to use those tools better within your organization. So once again, this is Lance Yoder, Clear Process Solutions Architect is my role. Been using the Winshuttle toolset for a number of years. Well, I started with the transaction and workflow, or excuse me, the transaction and query tools. The last couple of years, I've moved into the forms and workflow side of the product as well. And we're going to be talking about this transaction and query things just here in a moment. So looking at what we're going to be talking about today, the agenda for May, and looks like I forgot to update the agenda here, so we'll just update that real quick. So the May agenda, we're going to be looking at query, understanding how to use logical databases. So most people that are using query are using tables, and that's what I do. I use tables for the most part. So we're going to take a quick look at using logical databases. Then we're going to look at using transaction and reading indicators for validating results. And we'll talk more about what indicators are as we get to that. And we're going to look at using Central and some features for security at the line item or the script level security. It's not something too many people use, so I want to go ahead and talk about that. And then at the end, if we have some available time, we'll just have some open discussion. So, all right, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into query and using logical databases. All right, so what is a logical database? So if I'm creating a new query, I have the option to create a query, and you'll have three choices. Just let me log in here. You'll have three choices when you create your query. You can create your query from tables, you can use info sets, or you can use a logical database. So as it logs into the SAP for me here, those are the options. So tables, everyone's pretty familiar with tables. You have your MARA, your MARC, your LFA1, the standard tables that you're used to grabbing data from out of SAP. That's what most people are using, and generally that's what I use. I've never really used logical databases, so I said, well, let's try to figure out what this logical database stuff is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and select that in this case, and it looks a little bit different when it comes up. So you still have all of your controlling areas over here, or your functional areas. You have our basis components, but as you look inside of these things, these are not tables that you're really familiar with. These are just sort of brief descriptions, and until you sync those tables up or these logical databases up, you're really not sure what they are. So when would you use a logical database, and how do they differ from a table? So a table is just a flat structure. You have columns, and you have fields, and you can select those fields for selection criteria. Show me everything in this table where the material is greater than 5, and you can join those tables together to create your own little query. Well, logical databases are pre-built in SAP to help support like a hierarchical structure of information. So if you can think about, like BOMs, routings, orders, cost centers have hierarchy. Those types of things are very hard to join because they have like multiple levels of tables. So you have a parent, you have a child, you might have sub-children. Underneath that are sub-items underneath those items. And it's really hard to try to get those tables lined up to get exactly what you need. Because if you're going into SAP, you say, okay, well, show me the hierarchy for this. You just type it in, and magically SAP comes up with all of that structure. But there's a lot of things going on in the background. So SAP creates these logical databases to hold that structure for you, and oftentimes it's managed by date. There's a valid from date or date range that these things use. So we're going to take a look at that for bills of materials. So if I was to do a bill of material query, I would have to have my header table, which is the MAST. I'd have my item table, which is STKO, and STPO, and I might have sub-items as well. The problem with just joining those tables together is that bill of material items have validity dates. So while an item might be on a bill of material, it might be only valid from last year to 2 months ago. And then there was a replacement item from 2 months ago until the end of time, the old December 31st, 9999. However, when you go in to look at that table, you don't have the ability to find the valid date range, because at the component level, all you have is the valid from date. There's no valid to. SAP calculates and looks, oh, is there another component that's replacing this that has a valid date in the future? And if so, when you look at the material, it updates the valid to date of the previous one to be the same date of the valid from as the next one. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but that's not really how BOM components work. But if you were just to query that, you would just get all the components, because you can't put in a valid to date. SAP calculates that on the fly. That's where the logical database comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and take a material BOM. So this in logistics, I'm going to have material BOM, okay, and it brings that right in here. So you can see now I have a bit of a structure. Okay, so I have the header, mask, I have my BOM header item, my STKO, my item level, my STPO, and then I have sub-items, STPU. So you might be familiar with these tables. The B at the end is just more of the structure, but you can see your table names that you're used to seeing at this level. So if you wanted to get a bill of materials for something that's valid today, this is how you would be able to do that using the logical database. And after I brought that logical database into the design pane here, you can see that some items automatically came up as selection criteria. Okay, so unfortunately, you're limited to this selection criteria. You can't, like a normal query, select anything else in order to select from. You're stuck with what they give you. You can add additional outputs. We haven't selected any outputs. So if I want to do a bill of material, I definitely want to know the material number. I want to know the plant. I want to know the usage. And maybe I want to know the BOM number. Okay. So those things you can see start coming up as outputs. Now at the item level, I can select my item level table here, and you can see I get another list of columns. Okay, these are the list of fields that are available at the item level. I want to know what the valid from date is. Now again, I mentioned at the item level there's no valid to. This is why if you're going to do a normal query just using tables, you're going to get more results than you may be expecting, and you won't know it either because there's no valid to date in here. It's only valid from. So I want the valid from date for that component. Let's say I want the component number. So that's what the part number is going to be, and probably the item number and maybe a quantity in here somewhere. Where did I see the quantity? Component quantity, right there it is. Okay, so maybe those are the items I want to see for this bill of material at the item level. And if there are sub-items, I want to know what the sub-item detail is as well. I want to know the item number, the quantity, and the installation point, and any text. Okay, so those are going to be our outputs. Yes, I want to save my query. We will call this, put that in May. All right, we're just going to auto-create our mapping. So creating mapping is no different than using tables. You're going to drag your column, your fields down from the top to the bottom. So I'm just going to do auto map to make it a little bit easier for myself. And I'll go ahead and save the preview file. And we'll call that using logical databases demo, just to keep the same name. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run. And let's take a look at a bill of material within SAP. Okay, let's use CS03 and take a look at this material. Okay, we're going to use valid from and valid to today, so that's just the default, so it's going to give me the active bill of material. You can see I have a number of alternate BOMs here because I was doing some testing on this particular item. So I have 13 alternate bills of materials. That's quite often, quite a lot. You probably don't get up to that many. But we can take a look here at, let's take number 1. Okay, so we have a number of items that have been valid for a while. Let's see if there are any sub-items on these particular ones. So you can see sub-items exist from the check mark. So we have 3 components. And if we look at the sub-items, we can see that there are 3 sub-items. Okay. Installation at point A1, B1, C1 with different quantities and different text. Okay. So let's take a look, and we're going to run this query. Plant 1000 and usage of 1. And I'm not going to put in a date. If I don't put in a date, it's going to use today's date, just like it did on the screen when I went into the bill of material. So if I don't put in any date, it's going to go get the bill of material that's valid for today. Okay, so as we look at that bill of material, go to the header. Let's see if we can get back to the all of these alternate BOMs here. Okay, you can, as I said, there were 13 alternate bills of material, and they all have components. You know, some of them just have 1 or 2. Well, let's look at the return. So it came back, and I only received 1 bill of material. So you can see the bill of material number here, and these are the components. I did not bring back the component number, but we have sub-items. Only 1 item had sub-items. So when you're using the logical database, it is or let's say a hard join or an inner join. So since we brought in sub-items, it's only going to show me the bill of material items that have sub-items. Okay, so it only brought back items 30 from 1 bill of material, but it showed me the sub-items. So that's the one we looked at. Even though there were many alternate bills of material, because I'm using the sub-items, it's only going to show me those bills of material that have sub-items. Okay, so if I go back and adjust my query, we'll use the same sheet, but we'll call it sheet 2. We'll create a new sheet. And let's take out those sub-items. So let's go to the sub-item action section. We're going to take out those sub-items. And the number here indicates how many fields from each section or each level that you have selected. So we've selected 4 fields from the top level and then 4 fields from the component level. Let's check our mapping. Make sure it's okay. Our mapping looks okay there. We'll do sheet 2. Now when I do the same material, again, today's date, I should get a little bit more results. Okay, 39 records, so it's a little bit better. Let's take a look at sheet 2. So I lost the headers here, but let's just copy them over so we can see what's going on. Okay, now you can see we have multiple bills of materials, so components, different valid from dates, different item numbers. So it's downloading all the bills of material and all of the, what would have been nice if I would have put in the alternate BOM so I could see what the alternate BOM number is, because they're not all part of the same BOM. So if we added alternate bill of material here, we would see numbers 1 through 13 pop in here. But that's a little bit how this works. There are some limitations, but the great thing about using the logical database is that it gives you that interactivity with a hierarchical structure that's often based upon a date range. So if you want to look at a cost center hierarchy or profit center hierarchy that's valid on a certain date, you might not be able to generate your own query using tables alone because you might not have those valid validity dates in the table. So using the related logical database that already has those built-in items is very useful. So I use it for bill of materials. There are other uses out there for it, but I've pretty much just used it for bill of materials. So that's just a little insight to what logical databases are and how they can be useful. You don't have to worry about all the structures and the dates. The logical database does that for you. The downside is that you're limited to what you can use as selection criteria. So again, if we look at the query, you can only use selection criteria that are defaulted there. So you can see here, even though I've selected other items, I'm not able to select them for selection criteria. You can still have change the selection criteria, you know, is it in? Okay, some of them have options, some of them don't. I think you might be pretty stuck on some of those. That is a particular date, so maybe that's not the best one to select. Some of them do provide you options. There we go. So you can still use greater than, equal to, between on some fields. It looks like the date ones were locked out. Okay, so that's my little spiel, my little tip on querying things that have, you know, data structures, you know, layers of tables, parent, child, and especially if they're based on dates. Okay, so let's see what is next. Central. Okay, script security and policy management. So let me navigate over to Central. I think I have Central in here somewhere. All right. So here we have Central. This is just your plain vanilla Central setup here. And I clicked on transaction script. So Central, you know, the Central tool is really geared towards, you know, governance, script management, user management, license management, all of those type of capabilities that you don't have if you're running from the desktop or the node lock, which is no longer supported, or you're using Connect. You know, Connect does give you some ROI capabilities and some license management, and a little bit more granular license management than Central, but it doesn't have the ability to do any script management, policy management, or user management beyond that. So when we're looking at Central and we want to think about script management, we all know that if you're using Central, you load your script in here and it says production review status, and this limits really what people can do with that script if it's not a production status. We have policies. So if you look at the Central administration, we have policies that manage what people can do when. So we have non-production policies. We have policies that allow people to only use FB50 T code. So this allows anyone that's assigned this policy only to use FB50. Okay, so we have policies that we can manage as well. But what about scripts? What about if we have scripts out there that, you know, we don't want everyone to use, even though a user may have access to do PA30, you know, create a new employee. We don't want everyone that has access to PA30 and a runner license to be able to do that. Maybe we only want certain people to be able to run that T code or that script, even though they have access to that T code. So how do we manage that? Well, using SharePoint security, we can take a look at the permissions. So let's say we are going to create a new document folder for finance. So we're just going to have, or we'll use HR as our example. So human resources. Okay, so in our transaction script folder, we're going to create a new folder called human resources. And in here, we're going to put all of our HR related scripts. Okay, and this is one reason to, you know, really have a good structure for your scripts. You know, right now I just have a whole bunch here at the root level. You know, I really recommend for production clients that you have, you know, a good structure to your scripts. Break them out into meaningful groupings. So if necessary, you know, not only can you find them easier, but you can also apply permissions or unique permissions a little bit easier. So in this case, if I have human resources folder, I'm going to hit the drop down here, and I'm going to say Manage Permissions. This is the list of permissions that are available in this. So it says Inheriting Permissions from Parent from Winshuttle Central. So whatever the basic permissions are at the upper level, so at the site level, the Winshuttle Central level, that's how those permissions are being applied at this folder level. So you can see all the groups that exist, okay, and what access they have, okay, permission levels. Okay, but maybe I only want certain users to access my HR folder. I don't want everyone that has HR T codes and and runner licenses to be able to access my super secret HR scripts. So how can I do that? I'm going to go ahead and create a new group. In People and Groups, I selected People and Groups. I'm going to create a new group called Human Resource Specialists. Okay. I'm going to be the owner. I'm going to leave those defaults there. And I'm going to give people transaction runner level access. So it's almost like the transaction runner group, but I'm creating a special group and I'm applying the same privileges that a transaction runner would have. So those folks can go view that. Okay, I'm going to create that group. And if I go back and look at my transaction scripts and look at Human Resources folder again and manage permissions on that, I can see that my Human Resource Specialists are now there. And they're given the same transaction runner access that a transaction runner would have to that folder. So I have over here on my other screen, let's bring in, that's the wrong one. So let's use this version. Okay, so I have another session up here over in my Chrome. I am logged in as Peter Gabriel. He's going to be our user for today. So let's take a look at Peter Gabriel. Right now he has Human Resource. You can see the Human Resource folder, but maybe I don't want him to be able to do this. So I'm going to add special permissions to my Human Resources folder. So again, I'm looking at it right now, and I want to stop inheriting permissions from the parent. So I want to be specific about this folder. I don't want to have the general permissions that the upper level site does. I want to be specific. So now since I hit stop inheriting permissions, I can give this unique permission. So I want to delete everyone except maybe, let's see, my super special Human Resource Specialist. I'm going to delete everyone from that. Okay, so I'm going to remove permissions. And I'm going to keep myself just in case. Okay, so now the only people that can see that folder are the Human Resource Specialists and myself. So now if I look at my Peter Gabriel view, I'm going to refresh. Notice Human Resources went away. So that user can no longer see anything that's inside the Human Resources folder. So I'm going to open up Transaction. Somewhere, Transaction is hiding on my desktop. And I'm going to log in as Pete. Peter Gabriel really doesn't work for us. He's just one of our test users that we made up. All right, so now I'm logged in as Peter Gabriel, and if I want to open from Central, notice not only can I not see that in my SharePoint environment, let's sort by folder here. So I get folders at the top or the bottom. All right, I can only see the exact same things I can see in the SharePoint list. So if I'm looking here, I don't see the Human Resource folder, and in Transaction, when I'm trying to open, I don't see the Human Resource folder either. So now I'm going to go to People and Groups again, find my Human Resource Specialist, and I'm going to, I locked myself out. That's nice. So let's go to Finance. Oh, that's because I'm logged in over there as Peter Gabriel. Let's go to the right one. All right, so let's look at Human Resource Specialist, and I'm going to add Mr. Gabriel to this group. Okay, so he is now the Human Resource Specialist. So if I go back to Peter's view, and go back to Transaction Scripts, now once again I can see the Human Resources folder because I am a part, or Peter is a part of that group, and since I'm logged in here as Peter, that's what we see. So if I go back to Transaction as Peter, I can refresh. I'm going to open again. I can now see the Human Resources folder and anything that would be inside of it. Now I don't have anything published to the Human Resources folder, but if I did, I would be able to see them there. So that's a really neat way to manage script permissions. Now, again, if you're using folder structures, managing by the folder is an easy way to do that. If you're not managing by the folder level, if you have everything at the top level, or even if you are using folders and you still want to be specific about a script within a folder, you can apply the same kind of criteria. So inside of my top level here, let's say I want to manage MMO1 LWI. I only want to have certain access for that. I can do the same thing as I did at the folder level. I can go into permissions for that script. I can, this one already has unique permissions. So I can delete the permissions, except everyone. I need to add the human resources group in there if I want to give it to them. Okay, that's a valid group, and I'm going to give them the transaction runner level access to this block. Okay, so you can see the human resource specialists. I'm going to delete everyone else except them. Okay, so human resource specialists are going to be the only people that can see the MMO1-LWY transaction script. Okay, so if I take a look at that, it's there for me because I'm a site collection admin and I get to see everything. And if I go over to Peter's view and look at transaction scripts, I'm going to do a refresh. You can also see the same script because he has access to that. So let's go back to human resources, and I'm going to remove Peter from that list. Action, remove users from group. Okay, so Peter is no longer going to be able to see the human resources folder or the MMO1 LWI script. So we'll refresh, and sure enough, that access is gone. The MMO1 LWI script is no longer available for use. And if I look again, the human resources folder is not there, nor is that sort by name, just so we can see. There's no MMO1 either. All right, so you can use SharePoint groups. You can create your own SharePoint groups within Central to manage those permissions for those scripts. Now, when you submit a script, it's going to submit, if you're submitting to a folder, it's going to inherit the permissions of that folder. So if you don't have any special permissions set up, you're just going to get the general availability that everyone can see it. Your policies apply so that maybe not everyone can use it based upon the T code, but it'll still be out there for everyone to see. Okay, so now that we're talking about creating your own SharePoint groups to manage script level access, let's say you didn't want to go that route, you could still use those new groups against policies. All right, so if you have a group of people that you want to create a policy for, maybe I think I have a finance policy. So I'm going to create a new policy, or I have a finance group. So I'm going to create a new policy for transaction. I'm going to call it finance policy. Maybe we'll call it finance AR policy. Okay. So many finance people are going to have AR type access, but maybe we only want the people in the AR group to be able to run the scripts or the T codes that are related to AR. I'm not a finance expert, so I'm just going to make it up as we go here, but that's the intention of this policy. We're only going to allow them to do F-T codes. So I'm going to be able to run those particular T codes. And we're going to add our group, what did I call that? Finance users. We'll give that a shot. Okay, sure enough, there was a group that I created earlier called finance users. I'm going to save that. Because they don't have permissions, everyone to view. Okay, so based upon the way I set up that group, I would need to change a setting. But you can use those special groups that you've created if you've set up your settings correctly to manage policies as well. So let's see if I can go back and correct that real quick. Let's do finance users. And it might be something I have to do when I created it. So let's give that a shot. Who can view the membership? Everyone. And let's see if that fixes our problem. Let's try that again. We'll just use an existing policy and see if we can assign that group. Okay, a little bit easier there. So we were able to add that group. We're going to try again. Let's see if it takes it this time. Okay, looks like that was saved. So just had a setting in my group that I didn't set to allow everyone to view the membership. But you can use those special groups and assign policies as well. So if you don't want to do management at the script level, you can do it at the policy level using those special groups. You don't have to use just the ones that are out of the box with Winshuttle. All right, so let's take a break there to see if we have any questions. I'll take a look at the webinar. If you have any questions, just go ahead and raise your hand and we can unmute you if you have any questions about what we just saw with Central. Okay, then we'll move right along to the next topic. And the next topic will be using transaction and reading indicators for validating results. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of transactions that have indicators that may not be otherwise used for a transaction that don't give good results. So let's say I'm going to go into SAP and I'm going to do C223, which is creating production versions. So I'm going to manually create a production version here for that same material that we've been dealing with today. I have plant 1000 and material 100-100. You can see there's already production version out here. So let's talk about what an indicator is. Okay, so I have this record in here, and this is the indicator. So it's saying, hey, you know, I saved your record, but it's not valid. So we've done some kind of check, and it's not valid. Something needs to change. But if you were doing this transaction with a transaction script, because it took your change, when you add it to hit save, it would save your script. So I'm going to add a new production version, call it production version 3, and we'll just start adding some information. We'll do alternate 2, and we'll just start filling this information in. I think that's all I need. Okay. So I have not validated this yet, not yet checked, and I have this little yellow indicator. If I hit save, it saved my change, no messages. Okay, there were no messages that came up at the bottom that said, you know, record saved, it was good, or it was bad. It just saved it. So this is one of those transactions that it's just going to save, and it's not giving you any message whether that was good or not. So using this indicator would be an important way to still use transaction against these T codes and get some kind of feedback on the result. So let's take a look at a T code that is doing just that. So I'm going to delete this information here. I'm going to go ahead and show you what the rest of this T code is going to do before we run the transaction. So if I select the line item I'm interested in, I can do a consistency check. And it just brings out some text. So I'm not too concerned about that text. I just I hit back, and now I can see that my indicator is red. I hit save, you know, and it's going to save my change again, not really knowing if I was using transaction to do this, what the result was. But this is what the transaction script is going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these just so I can reuse that information. All right, so let's go ahead and open up that transaction script. I'm going to log in as me, just to make sure I have the access I need. And Pete was only a runner, so I have to close it and open it back up. So we'll just open up the script right from here. Okay. All right, and let's take a look at the spreadsheet that goes along with this transaction. All right. So this is the data that I'm going to be using: my plant, my material, my production versions, and tax, all the things that you saw me quickly enter on the screen. That's what we're going to be using for this particular transaction. So we're going to go step by step through this process on just that one. All right, so we're getting started here. SAP should come up for me. There we go. All right, so we're just going to go through this. Notice I entered on the second row by doing the page down, because if you come back in, you need to do 3 or 4 production versions. You never know where the first blank line is. So by using the page down, it's going to bump everything up, and then we enter on the second line every time. That way you always have a blank row to enter the information on. Okay, so now we're getting the messages. Okay, we're going to do the consistency check. I'm going to back out, exit, and then since we did that, we're going to prompt to save changes. All right, so let's take a look at the results. Okay, so we have this message here: routing, group 5,000,006, counter 1 is not always valid. All right, so, but we don't really know, and it's not, normally if something errored out, it's orange. The log color is orange. Here it's white, so that means it was a success. But if we didn't know any better, it's like, oh, it worked. It's in white. That's the message. That's okay. Not really sure what that means, but it's safe, so it must be okay. However, we are able to read that little light. So that little light that is on that T code actually has a value. So I'm going to put that back in here so we can see that light real quick. If I hit enter again, maybe it'll bring up the old one. There we go. All right, so here's the one we just entered, and it has a light. Now, when you're recording, as you know, many of the fields that are on the screens show up when you do your mapping. Even if you didn't select them, sometimes they show up. However, that's generally not the case in data grids. Not every field in a data grid, and a data grid is the section down here, something that has multiple line items. Not every field in the data grid automatically shows up. So in this case, this field here did not show up in my mapping on initial record. So I'm going to take a look at the basic view. And this is the field that I have here. Okay, so this field did not initially show up in my recording because it's not something that I touched when I was updating my data. So as I go back to that T code, wherever SAP may be, I can select that field just like I can anything else, and hit the help, and then do technical details for that field. Okay, so even though it's just a light, it's just a representation of a value. So here's the screen field that I need to add to that. So I can take that field and manually enter it into. So if I go back to expert mode where I can copy and paste items, right here we are. So read test results. I could go in and add a new row, which is what happened, and we can put in the technical details. So in order to do that, you might want to copy from an existing row. So let's just take one that we already mapped, so we know it has a good setup. So we'll take this one, bomb usage. Already has all the details. We'll get down and we'll add it. So we'll pretend that we didn't add this in there before. So now I just added a new row. We're going to call it read test results. Here, similar to the one below, it's just the description. And then from our screen, we can take our information screen field, and we can paste that right in here. Okay, now remember, because this is in a data grid, we have to put the parentheses in and then the row. Okay, so then now I can change that to download, and I could download that into whatever column I wanted. I could definitely drag it down there as needed. Okay, so that's how we would manage that. So let's take a look. I'm going to undo that. I'm not going to save that change there. But after I add in that light, let's take a look at the results. So I already ran the transaction script with that indicator in there. So now this is the value that is behind that light. And that's a little encrypted here. It has the @0a/q errors found and another at the end. But we can still key off of this. So even though it looks like this was valid because it didn't show up as an error, it did it, but the consistency check said found an error. So this would be an indicator that we would want to go back and take a look at that. So once again, I'm going to delete in SAP, I'm going to delete that production version. And then we're going to run through it again. I'll save. Okay, but this time I'm going to put some validation on this column. So I'm selecting the output column. I'm going to put some conditional formatting to highlight cells where it contains the text errors. Okay, because now I know errors are found. We'll specifically do errors found to make sure if no errors found is an option, it'll come up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete my results. And we'll do a couple of them. 2, 3, and we'll use bomb count, alternate bomb. 2, 3, just to make them a little different. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and run this in the run now mode. Okay, shows that I ran all 3 of my transactions, so 3 seconds to run 3 transactions. But let's take a look at the data file and see what happened. Okay, so we're still using the same routing, so we're going to get that same message. But now you can see, because I provided some highlights, that there were errors found. If everything worked out okay, the message from SAP for this T code would be no messages returned from SAP, okay? I'm sure we've seen that message before. So in that case, like, well, I don't even know if it's saved or not. No messages were returned. So I don't know if it was an error or if it was good or bad, but we would be able to see here whatever the message would be. Maybe it was no errors, something of that nature, no. Okay, it doesn't like my formula in there because the add sign, so let's put a. Okay, so now you can see that because it has does not have errors found in there, that the cell came up as white because I put on some validation. So very similar to what Winshuttle does when it errors on a transaction, you can put cell validation on here or custom formatting. So when that text comes back from that light, that indicator that indicates, that there's an error found, you will be able to visually see, right away that there were errors. Okay, so there are other T codes that have indicators that are very similar. So let's take a look at one of the other ones that can do that. And I don't have a transaction script set up, but I just want to give you an idea of other T codes that this is useful for. So CU50, if you live in the material variant world or the configured material, this might be helpful to you to validate a configuration. If you have a whole bunch of characteristics and a KMAT that you're trying to say, okay, is this a valid configuration? Do these attributes come up with a valid configuration against that KMAT? So we're going to put in a KMAT, and plant 1000 sales, that's fine. We'll just look at the configuration. Okay, so this is going to allow me to put in some characteristic and values. So I can put in all of these options. So I'm configuring my product here. You can see the little green lights. If I validate this, okay, still green. So I could use transaction to go into CU50 and do this and put in all of my values, and I can search for, if I length type, if I know what my characteristics are. I can search for length type. It'll bring it up to the top. So this is how you might loop through adding characteristics to your configurable materials through this T code by searching for that parameter. Okay, so certification, I could search for that, bring it to the top, enter my value, 10. Okay. I don't think it's really set up to provide any errors in this case. So that would generate an error there. But in all cases, I'm looking for this little light to change, and it's not changing on me yet. But that means everything I'm entering is a valid configuration. But you would be able to do that check and download this value. So after you hit enter, the last step of your routine would be to download this light. And just like we saw on the C223 create production versions, this also has a field, and the field name is just called light. So just like we did with the production version script, we would be able to add this field to our transaction recording and download this light. Now there's probably different messages behind here, but we can do that. And then after you run your configuration check, you can add all your characteristics, and then you back out of it. There's nothing to save in this T code. So we're not saving anything here. We're just validating. Notice the save button isn't even there. We're just doing a validation. So we'd run through all of our steps, and then we would need to use the exit. But right before we exit, you'll capture the value of that light. That value of that light would be downloaded to our Excel file, and we can use validation, cell validation, to determine whether it was valid or not. Whether you get a red square, the yellow triangle, or a green circle, each of those has special messages, specific to each T code, of course, but you would be able to read those messages down to your Excel file. With cell validation, be able to easily visually see which ones passed and which ones failed. So there are other T codes that have those lights as well, but for those cases where the T code doesn't really give you any indication of the true issue, no messages returned. That's not very helpful. You don't know whether it passed or failed. You might be able to read that indicator. Same thing for CU50. You're not really saving anything, you're just validating. You can download that light to see if it works. All right, so that's a unique way to do some T codes that you might not otherwise think you would be able to do because of messaging problems. You would be able to read those indicators. So I'll pause here again to see if there are any questions on what we just looked at for indicators. Okay, it looks like there are no questions on that topic. We have time here for some open discussion, so I just wanted to end the session to see if there are any general questions or if you have any topics that you'd like to see for next month, for form and workflow, or for 2 months from now for the desktop item. Looks like we do have one person here. Elisa, I unmuted you. Go ahead and take the floor.
Well, if you have some time, could you demo maybe real quickly of how to get into CPS's site so we can review past recordings? I missed last month's, and I just haven't had the chance to take some time to log into the system so I can see how to do that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put Dave Roa on the spot. Dave, so be prepared, Dave. It's coming over to you. I'm going to go ahead and pass privileges to Dave and see if I can do that. Change presenter. All right.
Thanks for that, Lance.
Don't thank me.
I'm not really, actually. Okay.
So you have presenter rights, and you go ahead and share when you're ready.
Okay. So there is, and what I can do is I can go ahead and send out a link specific to your portal page, but there is also a generic portal page that should work, and it is this generic portal page right here. It's kind of a long URL. I'll go ahead and send that out to you, anyone that asks, and at least I'll send it to you as well. And I can send the specific one for you as well from McKesson's page. But what I'm going to do is once you log into the portal, and I think this is going to be kind of the easiest way to do this. Let's just click this button here.
Does it require any particular browser or version of a browser?
It does not.
Okay. We're kind of behind here at McKesson. We're like on IE 8.
Well, it doesn't like my password. I think I may never have actually logged in through this portion before. So what I will do, bear with me one moment. I'm going to go in through your account, Lisa.
Okay. Okay.
Well, let me maximize. So if I go in here, I'll preview it through your portal, which I will go ahead and send you that link. And you'll see there's a tab across the top called Knowledge Base. So if you click on Search the Knowledge Base, you'll see the WEBtips show up here. You can also filter it by category.
Okay.
So when you click on one, it'll open up in a separate window. It'll show you the general topics as well as the actual video, the recording of the session. And then at the bottom, you'll get any of the attachments that were relevant to performing any of the tasks during the WEBtips.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so I don't know if you get into the portal at all. It's just a separate tab on the portal for Knowledge Base. And that's where you can find it.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds
and I'll
good.
make a note to send you a link to your portal.
Yeah, I probably have it buried somewhere in my email, but that would be great. Then I can get out there and review the ones I missed.
Okay, great. And I'm going to send it back to Lance for closing comments.
Okay, well, thanks, Dave, for taking the time to show that, and great question, Lisa. So everyone has the knowledge now to go out into the knowledge base and view previous recordings for those that have access to them. So if there are no other questions, thanks everyone for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you again. When is the next one? June 18th, I believe, is the next session. Yes, June 18th is the next session. That will be on forms and workflow. So again, if you have any ideas, go ahead and send them on over to us. So again, thanks for joining for May, and we'll talk to you next time.